In 1997, 18-year-old Natasha Cornett and 5 friends turned a road trip into one of Tennessee's darkest crimes. At a rest stop, they encountered the Llewellyn family and decided that they wanted to steal their car, so they forced them into their own van at gunpoint. On a remote back road, the family was lined up in a ditch and shot execution style. The parents died instantly. Their little girl clung to life for a day before succumbing to her wounds, and the toddler somehow survived but was left blind in one eye and permanently disabled. When investigators arrived, they found the family's bloodied Bible left open in the grass and tiny children's shoes scattered at the scene, with one officer describing it as one of the most horrifying crime scenes he had ever witnessed. The killers fled in the family's van hoping to reach Mexico, but were captured within days. Cornett, who later called herself the daughter of Satan and believed that he would spare her, instead learned she was powerless, condemned to life without parole alongside her accomplices. During the War on Terror, U.S. interrogators turned to music as a weapon, blasting songs on endless repeat in secret detention sites. Among the most infamous tracks was Eminem's The Real Slim Shady, which detainees reported being forced to hear non-stop for up to 20 days. Former prisoners described the experience as so unbearable that men would scream, weep, and even bang their heads against the walls for hours just to escape the sound, a form of psychological torment that left no physical scars but shattered minds. In January of 2022, shoppers at a Walmart in Crockett, Texas witnessed a bizarre and disturbing encounter. A woman named Rebecca Lynette Taylor approached a mother with an infant son and casually offered her $250,000 in cash to purchase the child. When the stunned mother refused and tried to leave, Rebecca allegedly followed her into the parking lot, doubling her offer to $500,000 and insisting she'd wanted to purchase the boy for a long time. Terrified, the mother contacted police and Rebecca was arrested and charged with the felony offense of sale or purchase of a child. Dr. Dre's younger half-brother, Tyree Crayon, met a violent and mysterious end in 1989 at just 21 years old. He was reportedly killed during a street altercation in Compton where he suffered a broken neck. But despite Dre's fame, Tyree's case was never solved, and very little information about the case has ever been released. Some reports suggest records may have been lost after the troubled Compton Police Department was disbanded years later, leaving his death forever shrouded in uncertainty. To this day, Dre has spoken about the deep emotional scar left by his brother's murder. In 2013, a Virginia man accidentally left his phone recording during a routine colonoscopy, only to later discover chilling audio of the medical staff mocking and humiliating him while he was unconscious. The anesthesiologist was caught calling him names, joking about giving him syphilis, and even plotting to cover up potential mistakes by blaming the patient. Outraged, the man sued, and in 2015, a jury awarded him $500,000 in damages. In September of 2025, 21-year-old University of Kentucky cheerleader Laken Snelling was arrested after her roommate called 911 to report finding a dead newborn in their off-campus home. The baby boy was found wrapped in a towel and shoved into a black garbage bag in the back of a closet. When first responders arrived, the baby was described as cold to the touch, suggesting he had been there for hours. Police later learned Snelling had secretly carried the pregnancy to term, delivered the baby in silence, and left him hidden before leaving the house. She was later taken into custody and charged with abuse of a corpse, tampering with evidence, and concealing the birth of an infant. Since her arrest, Snelling has withdrawn from the university and is no longer listed on the school's cheer team. If convicted, the felony charges alone carry up to 5 years in prison and thousands in fines. She was released on a $100,000 bond and is currently under house arrest with her parents in Tennessee as investigators continue to determine the baby's cause of death. In 2010, 15-year-old Rebecca Aylward agreed to meet up with her ex-boyfriend Joshua Davies after he promised her they might get back together. What she didn't know was that Davies had been boasting for weeks about his plans to kill her, even joking with friends about what he'd receive if he followed through with it. One friend sarcastically told him he'd buy him a breakfast if he actually did it. Just before the murder, Davies allegedly texted that same friend, "Don't say anything, but you may just owe me a breakfast." On the day of their meeting, Davies lured Rebecca into the woods near Aberkenfig, South Wales, where he crushed her skull with a rock and left her body face down in the mud. Hours later, when Rebecca's mother was frantically searching for her, Davies calmly updated his Facebook status to "feeling chill." At trial, jurors heard about his chilling boasts and casual cruelty, and he was sentenced to life in prison. The friend who joked about the breakfast later admitted that he never thought Davies would actually go through with it. These are some morbid facts about Charlie Sheen. In 1990, Sheen's engagement to actress Kelly Preston came to a bloody end when she was shot in the arm inside his home. Sheen later claimed a revolver had slipped from his pocket and accidentally discharged when it hit the floor, but the incident was enough for Preston to leave him immediately, prompting rumors that Charlie had actually attempted to kill her. While filming Money Talks, Charlie binged so heavily on cocaine that he suffered a nosebleed that wouldn't stop. The bleeding went on for 18 straight hours, leaving him physically drained and terrified. On the set of Free Money, after days of partying, Sheen was so exhausted and paranoid about passing out that he tried a bizarre method to stay awake. He claims he shoved an ice cube up his rectum to shock his body into alertness. He later recounted the story as one of the lowest points of his addiction. In 1995, Sheen's drug abuse had reached such a catastrophic level that doctors found his blood saturated with cocaine at a concentration so high it should have killed him on the spot. Paramedics were stunned that he survived the overdose, with some calling it a medical miracle. But finally, after years of infamous drug binges, public breakdowns, and reckless behavior that nearly destroyed his career, Charlie claims he's now been sober since 2017, over 8 years without drugs or alcohol. He admits he still gets constant cravings, but says he fights them by remembering the shame and chaos of his tumultuous past. In November of 2021, 23-year-old Tina Tintor was driving home in Las Vegas after taking her golden retriever Max out for a late-night walk when her car was suddenly struck at more than 150 miles per hour by NFL wide receiver Henry Ruggs III, who was heavily intoxicated. The impact sent her Toyota RAV4 up in flames, trapping both Tina and Max inside as bystanders desperately tried but failed to pull them out. Both were killed in the blaze, and Ruggs, who had a BAC more than twice the legal limit, was later sentenced to prison for DUI resulting in death. In 1991, schizophrenic artist Brian Charnley began a project unlike any other. He would paint 17 self-portraits as he gradually stopped taking his medication, documenting his slow descent into psychosis. Each canvas grew more chaotic and fragmented, mirroring his unraveling mind. His final portrait, completed on the very day he took his own life in July of 1991, remains a chilling testament to both his mental illness and artistic talent. In 2012, 18-year-old Gabby Scanlon was celebrating her birthday at Oscar's Wine Bar in Lancaster, England, when staff served her a cocktail topped with liquid nitrogen. Moments after downing the smoking drink, she felt a violent pain in her abdomen. Doctors later said it was as if her stomach had exploded from the freezing chemical. She was rushed into emergency surgery, where doctors had to remove her entire stomach and reroute her digestive tract just to save her life. 3 years later, in 2015, the bar was fined £100,000 for failing to recognize the danger of serving cocktails still bubbling with liquid nitrogen. Kansas City pharmacist Robert Ray Courtney illegally diluted thousands of medications, including chemotherapy, over nearly a decade, claiming extra profit. Estimates put the number of affected patients at about 4,200, with some treatments watered down to as low as 17% of the prescribed dose. Convicted in 2002 and sentenced to 30 years, he was released to home confinement in 2024 under the First Step Act, sparking outrage from victims who think his actions contributed to serious harm and deaths. There's a surgery so incredibly bizarre that's called tooth and eye surgery, known medically as osteoodontokeratoprosthesis. It's a last resort operation for people with severe corneal blindness. Surgeons remove one of the patient's canine teeth, root and jawbone included, hollow it out, and fit it with a tiny plastic lens. The bizarre implant is first stitched underneath the skin of the cheek for months, where it swells, fuses with flesh, and even grows its own blood supply before it's transplanted into the blind eye. Surgeons describe the moment of implantation as one of the most surreal in medicine, sliding a blood-soaked tooth back out of the cheek and into the empty cornea. The body is far less likely to reject the implant if it's made from the patient's own living tissue, making a tooth the ideal durable anchor. The result is an unsettling image, a tooth visibly embedded in the white of the eye with a lens peeking through like a peephole. But it's restored vision to people thought to be permanently blind, sometimes after decades in darkness. In August of 2020, 5-year-old Cannon Hanent was riding his bike outside of his Wilson, North Carolina home when his 25-year-old neighbor, Darius Sessoms, suddenly walked up and shot him point-blank in the head in front of his 2 sisters. The murder was described as execution style and left the community completely stunned, especially since Sessoms had shared dinner with Cannon's family just days prior. He was arrested within 24 hours and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, receiving life in prison without the possibility of parole. To this day, no clear motive has ever been revealed. Here's a photo of George Lincoln Rockwell, founder of the American Nazi Party, at a 1967 rally. Rockwell built his movement around hate-filled rallies in open admiration for Hitler. But his end came not at the hands of his enemies. In August of 1967, Rockwell was gunned down outside of a laundromat in Arlington, Virginia, shot twice through his car window by John Patler, a bitter former ally he had recently expelled from the party. The man who preached violence and division was assassinated by one of his own followers, leaving the American Nazi Party leaderless and fractured. This was the mask worn by 51-year-old Vance Luther Bolter when he posed as a police officer and ambushed Minnesota State Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette at their Champlin home in June of 2025. Dressed in a tactical vest and carrying a flashlight, he knocked on their door in the middle of the night, and the moment Hoffman said, "You're not a cop," Bolter opened fire. Bullets tore through the couple in their doorway. John struck 9 times, Yvette 8, as their terrified daughter Hope hid just feet away while her mother shielded her body with her own. Somehow, both parents survived after hours of surgery, but they were left in critical condition. However, the carnage didn't stop there. Hours later, Bolter stormed into the home of Minnesota House Speaker Melissa Hortman, executing she and her husband Gary as they both slept. Investigators later uncovered that he carried a disturbing hit list, targeting Democratic politicians and abortion providers, revealing the massacre as a carefully planned campaign of political terror, one that left Minnesota shaken to its core. At the height of his YouTube and FaZe Clan fame, Norden Chat, aka FaZe Rain, spiraled into a drug addiction so destructive that millions of fans watched him unravel in real time. What began with casually showing off painkillers to his audience escalated to him swallowing alarming amounts of pills on stream, bragging about it while his body silently deteriorated. By 2020, Rain was suffering seizures, collapsing, and eventually lost the ability to walk. Doctors warned the nerve damage in his legs might be permanent, leaving him in a wheelchair and forcing him into grueling therapy. His addiction wrecked friendships, destroyed his career, and turned a gaming star into a cautionary tale as fans saw him posting from hospital beds and fighting through constant pain. But after years of setbacks and near-death lows, he finally clawed his way back to sobriety. Rain can now walk again, is slowly attempting to rebuild his career, and now shares his harrowing story as a warning about how fast addiction can take everything. After retiring from the NFL in 1990, Hall of Famer Mike Webster's life unraveled into a spiral of bizarre and disturbing behavior. Once celebrated as the Iron Man of the Pittsburgh Steelers, he spent his final years homeless or sleeping in his pickup truck, suffering crushing headaches, dementia, and paranoia. Friends and family later described shocking habits, urinating in his own oven, shocking himself with a taser just to fall asleep, and gluing his decaying teeth back together. At one point, he even carried around a briefcase filled with superglue, painkillers, and duct tape, using them as makeshift tools to hold his broken body together. By the time he died of a heart attack in 2002 at just 50 years old, Webster's decline had become a cautionary tale of the hidden costs of football. When doctors examined his brain, they discovered the first confirmed case of CTE in an NFL player, proof of how the game had slowly destroyed him from the inside out. In 1978, San Francisco was left shaken when disgruntled former city supervisor Dan White snuck into City Hall through a basement window and gunned down Mayor George Moscone and Supervisor Harvey Milk in cold blood. At trial, prosecutors expected an easy murder conviction, but White's lawyers argued that he was deeply depressed, pointing to drastic lifestyle changes, including a diet of sugary junk food like Twinkies, as proof of his unraveling mental state. The bizarre argument, later mocked as the Twinkie defense, convinced jurors to downgrade his charges from murder to voluntary manslaughter. White was sentenced to just over 7 years, but walked free after barely serving 5. The shocking leniency sparked outrage across San Francisco, fueling the violent White Night riots and leaving the city completely haunted by the fact that the man who assassinated both its mayor and his supervisor spent less time in prison than many would serve for petty crimes. In April of 2023, 20-year-old Kaylin Gillis was riding with friends through rural upstate New York when their GPS led them into the wrong driveway. Realizing their mistake, they immediately began turning around to leave, but homeowner Kevin Monahan quickly emerged with a shotgun. Without a word, he fired 2 blasts into the vehicle as it rolled away, one round striking Kaylin in the neck. Her friends frantically drove miles searching for cell service, but by the time they reached any help, she was dead. At trial, prosecutors described how Monahan showed no remorse, even claiming he had done nothing wrong. The next year, a jury convicted him of second-degree murder, and he was sentenced to 25 years to life, leaving Kaylin's family haunted by the fact that a single wrong turn ended in their daughter's execution-style death. In March of 2023, Peruvian police discovered an 800-year-old mummy hidden in a food delivery bag. Its keeper, 26-year-old Julio Cesar Bermejo, claimed the remains were his spiritual girlfriend named Juanita and that she'd been in his family for generations. But experts revealed the preserved body was actually a man who died around age 45. The mummy was seized by Peru's Ministry of Culture for protection, while Bermejo was detained as authorities investigated how he came to treat a centuries-old corpse as his lover. Best known for playing Martin Corley on Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide, 36-year-old actor Tyler Chase has become the next tragic reminder of Hollywood's child star curse. Fans recently spotted him homeless in Los Angeles and Riverside, sparking a GoFundMe for food and shelter. Concerned strangers began sharing videos of him on TikTok and rallying support to help get him back on his feet.
Hello, my name is Tyler Chase, and I'm here on a Christian movement for acting.
But Tyler's own mother has since urged people not to donate, insisting that the man needs medical treatment, not money, explaining that he can't manage finances or even his medications on his own, and giving him money may only worsen his situation. The ashes you get after cremating a body aren't really ashes at all. During the burn, soft tissues and organs completely vaporize into gas, and any true ash is swept away through the chamber's exhaust. What's left are small bone fragments, which are then ground up in a machine called a cremulator to create the fine sand-like remains families keep in urns or scatter across Disney World. Despite the Ride of Steel roller coaster's posted rules and safety manual requiring riders to have 2 legs, Iraq War veteran Sergeant James Hackemer, who had lost both legs in combat, was still allowed to board the ride at Six Flags Darien Lake in 2011. Midway through the ride, he was violently ejected from his seat and killed instantly.